Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So here's another video for you guys today. This time it's actually on a budget build on the new Ice Barrier deck. So as y'all know, the new structure deck just recently came out. For me, they were actually delayed because we had a winter storm here in Texas. So unfortunately, I couldn't get these on the day of release. So I had to wait a few days until, things kind of settled back down to normal because so many stores were closed down. The roads were very icy and snowy, and here in Texas, we're not exactly prepared for that kind of weather. So yeah, last week was a pretty rough one to kind of get through, but again, thankfully things are back to normal. The weather's perfectly fine as it is now, so I'm just glad to be out of that. So anyway, talking about ice barriers. So ice barriers, I think it's okay. I mean, it's not really going to be like a tier 1 deck or anything like that. I think this is pretty decent for those who just want to play a casual, or basically towards the casual audience, I should say. So yeah, and also it's not a bad deck for beginners. So like if you're just like getting back to the game or just new at the game entirely, then this is not a bad pickup. Get 3 structure decks, you can put yourself together a decent deck and, just kind of like play for fun, before you decide to go into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! So yeah, honestly, like I'm not gonna lie, I really had some high hopes for the ice barriers, but unfortunately it didn't really execute as well as I wanted to. But of course I still want to support Konami. I still want to, bring you guys new Yu-Gi-Oh! Content every time something new comes out. So yeah, like I couldn't help myself just pick up 3 structure decks and just kind of like piece together the best build I could out of it. So anyway, let's go and get started. So as y'all know, this is a $30 budget, and I'm only using cards within the Ice Barrier structure deck, or should I say freezing trains. And funny enough, again, I went through a winter storm and it was freezing for a whole week long, so freezing chains is kind of fitting for that theme. But anyway, it does come with some new support for the Ice Barriers, and we'll get to that in momentarily. So anyway, starting off with 3 copies of Revealer of the Ice Barrier. So while you control another Ice Barrier monster, your opponent cannot tribute summon. That's okay, I guess. I mean, this is not really too relevant right now. Maybe during Draco format this would have been great, or maybe years ago when Monarchs were dominating, but unfortunately, yeah, that doesn't really do much at all. But also, here's what this card can also do. So you can use each of the following effects of Revealer once per turn. You can discard 1 card, special summon 1 Ice Barrier from your deck. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except water monsters, which is pretty okay. I mean, it's fine because this is a water deck anyway, so yeah, that restriction doesn't really affect you too much. And if you would discard or send cards from your hand to the graveyard, you can activate an Ice Barrier monster's effect. You can banish this card from your graveyard instead. So instead of just like discarding or whatever, so you don't have to like discard for cost, you could just banish this card from your graveyard. So not too bad, I guess. I mean, like I said, it's pretty good that it summons from deck, so that's what's important. You generally want to get your tuners out as quickly as possible. Next, 3 Speaker of the Ice Barriers. Funny, this is the one that says Ice Barriers. While you control another Ice Barrier monster, defense position monsters your opponent controls cannot change their battle position. Again, I don't know why that's even relevant, considering that, we have Link monsters. So I'm like, yeah, I don't really get it, but it's whatever. But you're generally going to use it for this effect. If you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, so it's an extender piece. And if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 Ice Barrier token, an Aqua Water monster, level 1, attack 0 and defense. So yeah, not too bad. Gives you, not only is it a free special summon, but it's also a token generator. So pretty good for synchro plays. Next, I'm actually playing 2 copies of the new Suijin of the Ice Barrier. So again, these are all new cards so far. You can tribute this card, special summon 1 level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand. Now that might come up every now and then, but you're generally going to be just using it for this. If this card's in your graveyard, except the turn it was sent there, you can target 1 level 3 or higher water monster you control, reduce its level by exactly 2, and if you do, special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So it's also a free extender and also has some level modulation. So if you need to like find ways to kind of like do your math correctly, you can definitely make Trishula this way too, if you have the right monsters to do so. So yeah, not too bad. Or if you just simply want to go into a card like Brio, Duloran, or even Gungnir if you need to, this card actually kind of helps facilitate that. So not too bad. And again, it contributes to bring out a level 5 or higher Ice Barrier monster from your hand, and there are a few targets you could do with this. So speaking of which, next, 2 General Wayne, which actually itself is a level 5 monster. Spell and traps sent from the field to the graveyard are banished instead, which isn't too bad this format, considering that, you know, we are in a control-heavy format. There's a lot of trap-based decks like Eldritch. So, like, I guess it's a way to kind of avoid them from recycling themselves. So, yeah, they'd have to get rid of General Wayne first in order to do so. But overall, not too bad of an effect. If your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, so another extender piece itself. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 Ice Barrier spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So it's also a free searcher just for your spells and traps. So definitely pretty good. I was thinking of running him at 3, but, you know, it is level 5, so unfortunately, I figured 2 was the best number. Next, 2 Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier. So this is going to be one of the new tuner monsters. While you control an Ice Barrier monster, while you control another Ice Barrier monster, monsters your opponent controls lose 500 attack points and defense points. Again, not too relevant, but during your main phase, you can send 1 level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to the grave, and if you do, this card's level becomes the same as that monster's until the end of this turn. So another free modulation when it comes to levels, and the fact that it's also a Foolish Burial, so that's actually pretty good. And also, you can only use this effect of Hexa once per turn. So yeah, overall that's pretty good. I mean, it's easy to bring out with revealers. So yeah, Hexa Spirit, definitely a free extender piece, you know, and it's also good for utility. So I figured why not. All right, now for the 1-ups. Now this is where things get a little different with my build. Most people have been running Prior. I actually do not run Prior in this build simply because Prior has that weird restriction where it locks you out of level 5 or higher monsters. I didn't like that. So instead, I'm playing 1 copy of Strategist for draw strength. I am running 1 Cryomancer. It's also a tuner monster, as well as Defender of the Ice Barrier. I don't really care for them for their effects. I mainly care for the fact of their levels and the fact that they are also tuner monsters. Now, speaking of the extenders, I'm also running 2 copies of Silent Angler. You know, pretty good. Does have a restriction, but it is for the rest of the turn once you use it. So just make sure you use it the right way. And that's really all I can say about it. And I'm actually running 1 copy of Fishborg Launcher. So as long as you control, or I'm sorry, not if you control, but if you have monsters in your graveyard other than Fishborg Launcher itself, and all of them are water monsters, you can special summon this card from the field, but banish it when it leaves the field. So it's actually not bad. And plus, since you do a lot of discarding in this deck, this is actually a free discard piece. I'm just kind of experimenting with it right now, but I was thinking of running maybe another copy of it if I have the room for it later. But again, I'm just still testing this out, and who knows, maybe this card could actually be a lot better than I expected it to be. But anyway, that's all for the monsters. Now we're moving on to spells. For spells, playing 3 copies of Winds Over the Ice Barrier. So you contribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters special summoned from your deck, that many level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monsters with different names from each other. During your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your grave, then target 1 Ice Barrier monster that is banished or in your graveyard, add it back to your hand. So this is actually pretty good for recursion. It also brings out some of your other Ice Barrier monsters from your deck if you distribute them. So it's actually not too bad, really. Next, 3 copies of Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier. So this is the new continuous spell. When this card is activated, you can target 1 level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your graveyard, special summon it. While you control 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters you control are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were special summoned from the extra deck. I really wish it wasn't just from the extra deck. I wish it could just be special summoned in general, but it is what it is. But overall, like the fact that, you know, it does build up some immunity for your Ice Barrier monsters is pretty nice. And of course, we're playing 3 copies of Medallion of the Ice Barrier. This is basically this deck's rota. It's not once per turn, so you can essentially, if you happen to have multiples in these, you can activate them all and just get all the combo pieces you need. 3 Salvage, you know, for recursion. 2 copies of Surface, which is basically a monster reborn for your water monsters, so it makes sense for this deck. And that's generally it for the spells right there, actually. Alright, now moving on to the trap cards. I'm actually running 3 copies of Crackdown. Crackdown is actually a really cool reprint, and plus it's really good this format right now because the fact that if you steal your opponent's monsters, you essentially deprive them from Synchro, Exceeds, and Link material. So, and you basically can use those monsters for yourself too. So yeah, Crackdown is actually not too bad. Next, 3 copies of Terror of Trishula. This is also a new card. It's the new trap card for the deck. So you can apply one of these effects in sequence depending on the number of Ice Barrier Synchro monsters you control with different names. Of course, that's a little conditional, but for this deck, I think it's alright. If you control one or more, you can banish one card your opponent controls, and keep in mind this does not target. 2 or more, banish one card from your opponent's graveyard. 3 or more, banish one random card from your opponent's hand. So this is basically just Trishula in the form of a trap card. And of course, when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets Ice Barrier Synchro monsters you control, you can banish this card from your graveyard and negate the effect. So it's actually good for, just for a defensive strategy. So overall, Terror Trishula, just a trap card version of Trishula itself. So yeah, not too bad, I guess. Next, 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster. As I mentioned, this is a control heavy format. You need some form of back row removal, and I figured, since Heavy Storm Duster does come in the structure deck, that's probably gonna be the best way to do it. All right, so for the extra deck, funny enough, you get every Ice Barrier Synchro monster, but 2 of them are actually limited, so I can't have a full extra deck for right now, but again, it's fine. Starting off with the new big boss monster, Trishula Zero, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. So it's basically the same as the original. The only difference is that you can banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls, and of course that means it has to be on the field. And if this Synchro Summon card is destroyed by an opponent's card, not specific on a card effect, it can be by battle or card effect actually. And of course, you can special summon 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, from your extra deck or in your graveyard, and its attack becomes 3,300. So theoretically, you could summon the original if it's sent away to the graveyard, or just synchro to, or actually no, you have to have 2 or more non-tuner monsters to make it anyway. But overall, if you already have Trishula in the graveyard, like if you already used this effect once and your opponent somehow got over it, you could essentially bring it back after you use Trishula Zero, just let it get destroyed, and then the original one comes back. Of course, you can't reuse the effect, because I believe the original Trishula has to be synchro summoned. Yep, reading it right now. So, but still, the fact that you get to have it at 3,300 attack points, and also this Trishula also has a punishment effect. So once it hits the graveyard, if I'm not mistaken, face-up monsters your opponent controls get their effects negated, and also their attack is halved. So that's actually pretty good. Not only does Trishula become bigger, but your opponent's monsters become half of what they originally are, and their effects are negated. So yeah, that's pretty good for punishment. Next up, of course, the original Trishula. Aaron already knows what this does, and thank God it's still at 1, because when it was back at 3, I was like genuinely scared because people were doing hand loops. But now that they decided to put it back to 1, it needs to stay at 1. Now, next card, I believe that could potentially come to 3, simply because it does have the errata. Duloran, Tiger King of the Ice Barrier. So for those who don't know what this card does, it says this: you can target any number of or other face-up cards you control, so not specific on the Ice Barriers. Return those targets to your hand, and if you do, this card gains 500 attack points for every return card to your hand until the end of this turn. You can only use this effect once per turn. So Duloran's errata effect is now a hard once per turn, but the fact that you can essentially give him a huge power boost could lead to some OTK potential, and not to mention there's a fairly easy synchro monster to make. So yeah, I really don't see any problems with this card anymore, so they could definitely bring this back to 3. Next, 3 Brio. Also had got an errata. The original was not a hard once per turn at all. So Brio is a hard once per turn. You can discard any number of cards to the graveyard, then target the same number of cards your opponent controls, return those cards back to the hand. So it's basically a compulsory, but just on steroids in my opinion. And last but not least, 3 copies of Gungnir. Not nearly as good as the other ones, but still pretty good. You can discard up to 2 cards to the graveyard, then target the same number of cards your opponent controls, destroy them. Of course, it does target and it does destroy, but again, that's not too bad. The fact that you can pop anything is actually pretty good. So you could essentially pop back row too. So yeah, Gungnir, Twin Twisters on legs. I'm okay with that, honestly. All right, so that's pretty much it for the extra deck. Now moving on to the side deck, and funny enough, there actually was enough cards here to make a side deck. So for the monsters, I'm running 2 Moulin Glacia, the Elemental Lord. So this basically just discards 2 random cards from your opponent's hand, so long as you control exactly 5 water monsters in your graveyard. And yeah, a free special summon, and the fact that again it can just rip 2 out of your opponent's hand. Now that might seem bad at first because you don't want to give your opponent resources, but if you can manage to work around it, actually does make Trishula a little more live. So like, if you can bring this out, summon out Trishula, banish one from the graveyard, it really doesn't matter. So honestly, there is some hidden synergy there, in my opinion. Next, 3 magic triangle of the Ice Bearer. So you can reveal 3 Ice Bearer monsters with different names from your hand. Then target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy that target, and if you do, special summon 1 Ice Bearer monster from your hand. So it's kind of weird the fact that you are giving your opponent hand knowledge, but it's also good for back removal. So I mean, why not, right? This one I don't really know why it was in the structure deck, but 3 copies of Fiendish Chain. I think Lost Wind or even Solemn Strike would have been a better pick, because Fiendish Chain, I mean, I think Simo kind of didn't actually worded it better. It's not 2011 anymore. Keep in mind the card is still good, but there are just ways to play around this. And again, Crackdown to me was definitely the better card. But Fiendish Chain, you know, who knows? It could be a turn ender if you actually time it just right, I guess. 3 Mind Drain, another weird card to be in the structure deck. I mean, yeah, it stops hand traps, technically speaking, but still, like, is that really enough right now? I'm like, not really. So yeah, it is what it is. 3 Point of the Red Lotus. Actually, a pretty good reprint in this structure deck. So the fact that you can banish a card out of your opponent's hand until the end of the next turn, yeah, Pointer is not too bad. And then, of course, a 3rd copy of Heavy Storm Duster, just in case if I need it. But overall, I did the best I could for the side deck. But anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.